He in a petty coastal traffic plies, his pay doled out from port to neighbor port, content with his safe round's unchanging course, he hazards not the new and the unseen. But now he hears the sound of larger seas. A widening world calls him to distant scenes and journeyings in a larger vision's arc and peoples unknown and still unvisited shores. On a commissioned keel his merchant hull serves the world's commerce in the riches of time, severing the foam of a great land, lock sea to reach unknown harbor lights in distant climes and open markets for life's opulent arts, rich bales, carved statuettes, hued canvases, and jewel toys brought for an infant's play and perishable products of hard toil and transient splendors won and lost by the days. Or passing through a gate of pillar rocks, venturing not yet to cross oceans unnamed and journey into a dream of distances, he travels close to unfamiliar coasts and finds new haven in storm, troubled isles, or, guided by a sure compass in his thought, he plunges through a bright haze that hides the stars, steering on the trade routes of ignorance. His prow pushes towards undiscovered shores, he chances on unimagined continents, a seeker of the islands of the blessed, he leaves the last lands, crosses the ultimate seas, he turns to eternal things, his symbol quest hangs round him no longer its translucent veil. He has crossed the limit of mortal thought and hope, he has reached the world's end and stares beyond, the eyes of mortal body plunge their gaze into eyes that look upon eternity. A greater world time's traveler must explore. At last he hears a chanting on the heights and the far speaks and the unknown grows near. He crosses the boundaries of the unseen and passes over the edge of mortal sight to a new vision of himself and things. He is a spirit in an unfinished world that knows him not and cannot know itself. The surface symbol of his goalless quest takes deeper meanings to his inner view. His is a search of darkness for the light, of mortal life for immortality. In the vessel of an earthly embodiment over the narrow rails of limiting sense he looks out on the magic waves of time where mind like a moon illumines the world's dark. There is limbed ever retreating from the eyes, as if in a tenuous misty dream, light drawn, the outline of a dim mysterious shore. A sailor on the inconscient's fathomless sea, he voyages through a starry world of thought on matter's deck to a spiritual Sunday across the noise and multitudinous cry, across the rapt unknowable silences, through a strange mid-world under supernal skies, beyond Earth's longitudes and latitudes, his goal is fixed outside all present maps. But none learns whither through the unknown he sails or what secret mission the Great Mother gave. Through the thunder's roar and through the windless hush, through fog and mist where nothing more is seen, he carries her sealed orders in his breast. Late will he know, opening the mystic script, whether to a blank port in the unseen he goes or, armed with her fiat, to discover a new mind and body in the city of God and enshrine the immortal in his glory's house and make the finite one with infinity. Across the salt waste of the endless years her ocean winds impel his errant boat, the cosmic waters plashing as he goes, a rumor around him and danger and a call. Always he follows in her force's wake. He sails through life and death and other life, he travels on through waking and through sleep. A power is on him from her occult force that ties him to his own creation's fate, and never can the mighty traveler rest and never can the mystic voyage cease till the nescient dusk is lifted from man's soul and the morns of God have overtaken his night. As long as nature lasts, he too is there, for this is sure that he and she are one. Even when he sleeps, he keeps her on his breast, whoever leaves her, he will not depart to repose without her in the unknowable. There is a truth to know, a work to do, her play is real, a mystery he fulfills. There is a plan in the mother's deep world, whim, a purpose in her vast and random game. This ever she meant since the first dawn of life, this constant will she covered with her sport, to evoke a person in the impersonal void, with the truth, light strike earth's massive roots of trance, wake and raise a lost power from its python sleep that the eyes of the timeless might look out from time and the world manifest the unveiled divine. For this he left his white infinity and laid on the spirit the burden of the flesh, that Godhead's seed might flower in mindless space. Canto 5. The Yoga of the King, the Yoga of the Spirit's freedom and greatness. This knowledge first he had of time-born men. Admitted through a curtain of bright mind that hangs between our thoughts and absolute sight, he found the occult cave, the mystic door near to the well of vision in the soul, and entered where the wings of glory brood in the silent space where all is forever known. Indifferent to doubt and to belief, avid of the naked real single shock, he shore the cord of mind that ties the earth, heart, and cast away the yoke of matter's law. The body's rules bound not the spirit's powers. When life had stopped its beats, death broke not in, he dared to live when breath and thought were still. Thus could he step into that magic place which few can even glimpse, with hurried glance lifted for a moment from mind's labored works and the poverty of nature's earthly sight. All that the gods have learned is their self-known. There in a hidden chamber closed and mute are kept the record graphs of the cosmic scribe, and there the tables of the sacred law. There is the book of being's index page, the text and glossary of the Vedic truth are there, the rhythms and meters of the stars significant of the movements of our fate, the symbol powers of number and of form, and the secret code of the history of the world and nature's correspondence with the soul are written in the mystic heart of life. I in the glow of the spirit's room of memories he could recover the luminous marginal notes dotting with light the crabbed ambiguous scroll, rescue the preamble and the saving clause of the dark agreement by which all is ruled that rises from material nature's sleep to clothe the everlasting in new shapes. He could read now and interpret new its strange symbol letters, scattered abstruse signs, resolve its oracle and its paradox, its riddling phrases and its blindfold terms, the deep oxymoron of its truths repliques, and recognize as a just necessity its hard conditions for the mighty work. Nature's impossible Herculean toil only her warlock wisecraft could enforce, its law of the opposition of the gods, its list of inseparable contraries. The dumb Great Mother in her cosmic trance exploiting for creation's joy and pain infinity's sanction to the birth of form, accepts indomitably to execute the will to know in an inconscient world, the will to live under a reign of death, the thirst for rapture in a heart of flesh, and works out through the appearance of a soul by a miraculous birth in plasm and gas the mystery of God's covenant with the night. Once more was heard in the still cosmic mind the Eternal's promise to his laboring force inducing the world, passion to begin, the cry of birth into mortality and the opening verse of the tragedy of time. Out of the depths the world's buried secret rose. He read the original ukase kept back in the locked archives of the spirit's crypt, and saw the signature and fiery seal of wisdom on the dim power's hooded work who builds in ignorance the steps of light. A sleeping deity opened deathless eyes, he saw the unshaped thought in soulless forms, new matter pregnant with spiritual sense, mind dare the study of the unknowable, life its gestation of the golden child. In the light flooding thought's blank vacancy, interpreting the universe by soul signs he read from within the text of the without, the riddle grew plain and lost its catch obscure. A larger luster lit the mighty page. A purpose mingled with the whims of time, a meaning met the stumbling pace of chance and fate revealed a chain of seeing will, a conscious wideness filled the old dumb space. In the void he saw throned the omniscient supreme. A will, a hope immense now seized his heart, and to discern the superhuman's form he raised his eyes to unseen spiritual heights, aspiring to bring down a greater world. The glory he had glimpsed must be his home. A brighter heavenlier sun must soon illume this dusk room with its dark internal stare, the infant soul in its small nursery school mid objects meant for a lesson hardly learned outgrow its early grammar of intellect and its imitation of earth, nature's art, its earthly dialect to God, language change. In living symbols study reality and learn the logic of the infinite. The ideal must be nature's common truth, the body illumined with the indwelling God, the heart and mind feel one with all that is, a conscious soul live in a conscious world. As through a mist a sovereign peak is seen, the greatness of the eternal spirit appeared, exiled in a fragmented universe amid half-semblances of diviner things. These now could serve no more his regal turn. The immortal's pride refused the doom to live a miser of the scanty bargain made between our littleness and bounded hopes and the compassionate infinitudes. His height repelled the lowness of earth state, a wideness discontented with its frame resiled from poor assent to nature's terms, the harsh contract spurned and the diminished lease. Only beginnings are accomplished here, our base's matter seems alone complete, an absolute machine without a soul. Or all seems a misfit of half ideas, or we saddle with the vice of earthly form a hurried imperfect glimpse of heavenly things, guesses and travesties of celestial types. Here chaos sorts itself into a world, a brief formation drifting in the void, apings of knowledge, unfinished arcs of power, flamings of beauty into earthly shapes, love's broken reflexes of unity swim, fragment, mirrorings of a floating Sunday, a packed assemblage of crude tentative lives are pieced into a tessellated whole. There is no perfect answer to our hopes, there are blind voiceless doors that have no key, thought climbs in vain and brings a borrowed light, cheated by counterfeits sold to us in life's mart, our hearts clutch at a forfeited heavenly bliss. Here even the highest rapture time can give is a mimicry of ungrasped beatitudes, a mutilated statue of ecstasy, a wounded happiness that cannot live, a brief felicity of mind or sense thrown by the world, power to her body, slave, or a simulacrum of enforced delight in the seraglios of ignorance. For all we have acquired soon loses worth, an old disvalued credit in time's bank, imperfections check drawn on the inconscient. An inconsequence dogs every effort made, and chaos waits on every cosmos formed, in each successor seed of failure lurks. He saw the doubtfulness of all things here, the incertitude of man's proud confident thought, the transience of the achievements of his force. A thinking being in an unthinking world, an island in the sea of the unknown, he is a smallness trying to be great, an animal with some instincts of a god, his life a story too common to be told, his deeds a number summing up to naught, his consciousness a torch lit to be quenched, his hope a star above a cradle and grave. And yet a greater destiny may be his, for the eternal spirit is his truth. He can re-create himself and all around and fashion new the world in which he lives. He, ignorant, is the knower beyond time, he is the self above nature, above fate. His soul retired from all that he had done. Hushed was the futile din of human toil, forsaken wheeled the circle of the days, in distance sank the crowded tramp of life. The silence was his sole companion left. Impassive he lived immune from earthly hopes, a figure in the ineffable witness shrine pacing the vast cathedral of his thoughts under its arches dim with infinity and heavenward brooding of invisible wings. A call was on him from intangible heights, indifferent to the little outpost mind, he dwelt in the wideness of the Eternal's reign. His being now exceeded thinkable space, his boundless thought was neighbor to cosmic sight, a universal light was in his eyes, a golden influx flowed through heart and brain, a force came down into his mortal limbs, a current from eternal seas of bliss, he felt the invasion and the nameless joy. Aware of his occult omnipotent source, allured by the omniscient ecstasy, a living center of the illimitable widened to equate with the world's circumference, he turned to his immense spiritual fate. Abandoned on a canvas of torn air, a picture lost in far and fading streaks, the earth, nature's summit sank below his feet, he climbed to meet the infinite more above. The immobile's ocean, silence saw him pass, an arrow leaping through eternity suddenly shot from the tense bow of time, a ray returning to its parent Sunday opponent of that glory of escape, the black inconscience swung its dragon tail lashing a slumbrous infinite by its force into the deep obscurities of form, death lay beneath him like a gate of sleep. One pointed to the immaculate delight, questing for God as for a splendid prey, he mounted burning like a cone of fire. To a few is given that godlike rare release. One among many thousands never touched, engrossed in the external world's design, is chosen by a secret witness iron driven by a pointing hand of light across his soul's unmapped immensitudes. A pilgrim of the everlasting truth, our measures cannot hold his measureless mind, he has turned from the voices of the narrow realm and left the little lane of human time. In the hushed precincts of a vaster plan he treads the vestibules of the unseen, or listens following a bodiless guide to a lonely cry in boundless vacancy. All the deep cosmic murmur falling still, he lives in the hush before the world was born, his soul left naked to the timeless one. Far from compulsion of created things thought and its shadowy idols disappear, the molds of form and person are undone, the ineffable wideness knows him for its own. A lone forerunner of the God-ward earth, among the symbols of yet unshaped things watched by closed eyes, mute faces of the unborn, he journeys to meet the incommunicable, hearing the echo of his single steps in the eternal courts of solitude. A nameless marvel fills the motionless hours. His spirit mingles with eternity's heart and bears the silence of the infinite. In a divine retreat from mortal thought, in a prodigious gesture of soul, sight, his being towered into pathless heights, naked of its vesture of humanity. As thus it rose, to meet him bare and pure a strong descent leaped down. A might, a flame, a beauty half, visible with deathless eyes, a violent ecstasy, a sweetness dire, enveloped him with its stupendous limbs and penetrated nerve and heart and brain that thrilled and fainted with the epiphany, his nature shuddered in the unknown's grasp. In a moment shorter than death, longer than time, by a power more ruthless than love, happier than heaven, taken sovereignly into eternal arms, hailed and coerced by a stark absolute bliss, in a whirlwind circuit of delight and force hurried into unimaginable depths, upborne into immeasurable heights, it was torn out from its mortality and underwent a new and bournless change. An omniscient knowing without sight or thought, an indecipherable omnipotence, a mystic form that could contain the worlds, yet make one human breast its passionate shrine, drew him out of his seeking loneliness into the magnitudes of God's embrace. As when a timeless eye nulls the hours abolishing the agent and the act, so now his spirit shone out wide, blank, pure, his wakened mind became an empty slate on which the universal and soul could write. All that represses our fallen consciousness was taken from him like a forgotten load. A fire that seemed the body of a god consumed the limiting figures of the past and made large room for a new self to live. Eternity's contact broke the molds of sense. A greater force than the earthly held his limbs, huge workings bared his undiscovered sheaths, strange energies wrought and screamed, tremendous hands unwound the triple cord of mind and freed the heavenly wideness of a godhead's gaze. As through a dress the wearer's shape is seen, there reached through forms to the hidden absolute a cosmic feeling and transcendent sight. Increased and heightened were the instruments. Illusion lost her aggrandizing lens, as from her failing hand the measures fell, atomic looked the things that loomed so large. The little ego's ring could join no more, in the enormous spaces of the self the body now seemed only a wandering shell, his mind the many, frescoed outer court of an imperishable inhabitant, his spirit breathed a superhuman air. The imprisoned deity rent its magic fence. As with a sound of thunder and of seas, vast barriers crashed around the huge escape. Immutably coeval with the world, circle and end of every hope and toil inexorably drawn round thought and act, the fixed immovable peripheries effaced themselves beneath the incarnate's tread. The die of a layman and the bottomless crypt between which life and thought forever move, forbidden still to cross the dim dread bounds, the guardian darknesses mute and formidable, empowered to circumscribe the wingless spirit in the boundaries of mind and ignorance, protecting no more a dual eternity vanished, rescinding their enormous role, once figure of creation's vain ellipse, the expanding zero lost its giant curve. The old adamantine vetoes stood no more, overpowered were earth and the python coils of the restricting law could not restrain the swift arisen God, abolished were the scripts of destiny. There was no small death, hunted creature more, no fragile form of being to preserve from an all-swallowing immensity. The great hammer, beats of a pent-up world, heart burst open the narrow dams that keep us safe against the forces of the universe. The soul and cosmos faced as equal powers. A boundless being in a measureless time invaded nature with the infinite, he saw unpathed, unwalled, his titan scope. All was uncovered to his sealless eye. A secret nature stripped of her defense, once in a dreaded half-light formidable, overtaken in her mighty privacy lay bare to the burning splendor of his will. In shadowy chambers lit by a strange sun and opening hardly to hid mystic keys her perilous arcanes and hooded powers confessed the advent of a mastering mind and bore the compulsion of a time-born gaze. Incalculable in their wizard modes, immediate and invincible in the act, her secret strengths native to greater worlds lifted above our needy limited scope, the occult privilege of demigods and the sure power, pattern of her cryptic signs, her diagrams of geometric force, her potencies of marvel, fraught design courted employment by an earth-nursed might. A conscious nature's quick machinery armed with the latent splendor of miracle, the prophet, passion of a seeing mind, and the lightning bareness of a free soul, force. All once impossible deemed could now become a natural limb of possibility, a new domain of normalcy supreme. An almighty occultist erects in space this seeming outward world which tricks the sense, he weaves his hidden threads of consciousness, he builds bodies for his shapeless energy, out of the unformed and vacant vast he has made his sorcery of solid images, his magic of formative number and design, the fixed irrational links none can annul, this cross tangle of invisible laws, his infallible rules, his covered processes, achieve unerringly an inexplicable creation where our error carves dead frames of knowledge for a living ignorance. In her mysteries moods divorced from the Maker's laws she too as sovereignly creates her field, her will shaping the undetermined vasts, making a finite of infinity, she too can make an order of her caprice, as if a rash superb wagered to outvie the veiled Creator's cosmic secrecies. The rapid footsteps of her fantasy, amid whose falls wonders like flowers rise, are surer than reason, defter than device and swifter than imagination's wings. All she knew, fashions by the thought and word, compels all substance by her wand of mind. Mind is a mediator divinity, its powers can undo all nature's work, mind can suspend or change earth's concrete law. Affranchised from earth, habits drowsy seal the leaden grip of matter it can break, indifferent to the angry it can immortalize a moment's work, a simple fiat of its thinking force, the casual pressure of its slight assent can liberate the energy dumb and pent within its chambers of mysterious trance, it makes the body's sleep a puissant arm, holds still the breath, the beatings of the heart, while the unseen is found, the impossible done, communicates without means the unspoken thought, it moves events by its bare silent will, acts at a distance without hands or feet. This giant ignorance, this dwarfish life it can illumine with a prophet sight, invoke the Bacchic rapture, the Furies goad, in our body arouse the demon or the god, call in the omniscient and omnipotent, awake a forgotten almightiness within. In its own plane a shining emperor, even in this rigid realm, mind can be king, the logic of its demigod idea in the leap of a transitional moment brings surprises of creation never achieved even by matter's strange unconscious skill. All's miracle here and can by miracle change. This is that secret nature's edge of might. On the margin of great immaterial planes, in kingdoms of an untrammeled glory of force, where mind is master of the life and form and soul fulfills its thoughts by its own power, she meditates upon mighty words and looks on the unseen links that join the parted spheres. Thence to the initiate who observes her laws she brings the light of her mysterious realms, here where he stands, his feet on a prostrate world, his mind no more cast into matter's mold, over their bounds in spurts of splendid strength she carries their magician processes and the formulas of their stupendous speech, till heaven and hell become perverse to earth and the universe the slave of mortal will. A mediatrix with veiled and nameless gods whose alien wool touches our human life, imitating the world, magician's ways she invents for herself, bound free, will its grooves and feigns for magic's freaks a binding cause. All worlds she makes the partners of her deeds, accomplices of her mighty violence, her daring leaps into the impossible, from every source she has taken her cunning means, she draws from the free, love marriage of the plane's elements for her creation's tour de force, a wonder, weft of knowledge incalculable, a compendium of divine inventions feats she has combined to make the unreal true or liberate suppressed reality. In her unhedged Circean wonderland pell-mell she shepherds her occult mightinesses, her mnemonics of the craft of the infinite, jets of the screened subliminal's caprice, tags of the gramarye of inconscience, freedom of a sovereign truth without a law, thoughts that were born in the immortal's world, oracles that break out from behind the shrine, warnings from the demonic inner voice and peeps and lightning leaps of prophecy and intimations to the inner ear, abrupt interventions stark and absolute and the superconscient's unaccountable acts, have woven her balanced web of miracles and the weird technique of her tremendous art. This bizarre kingdom passed into his charge. Her great possessions and her power and law she gave, compelled, with a reluctant joy, herself she gave for rapture and for use. Absolved from aberrations in deep ways, the ends she recovered for which she was made, she turned against the evil she had helped her engendered wrath, her invisible means to slay, her dangerous moods and arbitrary force she surrendered to the service of the soul and the control of a spiritual will. A greater despot tamed her despotism. Assailed, surprised in the fortress of herself, conquered by her own unexpected king, fulfilled and ransomed by her servitude, she yielded in a vanquished ecstasy, her sealed hermetic wisdom forced from her, fragments of the mystery of omnipotence. A border sovereign is the occult force. A threshold guardian of the earth, scenes beyond, she has canalized the outbreaks of the gods and cut through vistas of intuitive sight a long road of shimmering discoveries. The worlds of a marvelous unknown were near, behind her an ineffable presence stood, her reign received their mystic influences, their lion forces crouched beneath her feet, the future sleeps unknown behind their doors. Abysms infernal gaped round the soul's steps and called to its mounting vision peaks divine. An endless climb and adventure of the idea there tirelessly tempted the explorer mind, and countless voices visited the charmed ear, a million figures passed and were seen no more. This was a forefront of God's thousandfold house, beginnings of the half, screened invisible. A magic porch of entry glimmering quivered in a penumbra of screened light, a court of the mystical traffic of the worlds, a balcony and miraculous facade. Above her lightened high immensities, all the unknown looked out from boundlessness, it lodged upon an edge of hourless time, gazing out of some everlasting now, its shadows gleaming with the birth of gods, its bodies signaling the bodiless, its foreheads glowing with the oversoul, its forms projected from the unknowable, its eyes dreaming of the ineffable, its faces staring into eternity. Life in him learned its huge subconscient rear, the little fronts unlocked to the unseen vasts, her gulfs stood nude, her far transcendences flamed in transparencies of crowded light. A giant order was discovered here of which the tassel and extended fringe are the scant stuff of our material lives. This overt universe whose figures hide the secrets merged in superconscient light, wrote clear the letters of its glowing code, a map of subtle signs surpassing thought was hung upon a wall of inmost mind. Illumining the world's concrete images into significant symbols by its gloss, it offered to the intuitive exegete its reflex of the eternal mystery. Ascending and descending twixt life's poles, the serried kingdoms of the graded law plunged from the everlasting into time, then glad of a glory of multitudinous mind and rich with life's adventure and delight and packed with the beauty of matter's shapes and hues, climbed back from time into undying self, up a golden ladder carrying the soul, tying with diamond threads the spirit's extremes. In this drop from consciousness to consciousness each leaned on the occulting conscience power, the fountain of its needed ignorance, archmason of the limits by which it lives. In this soar from consciousness to consciousness each lifted tops to that from which it came, origin of all that it had ever been and home of all that it could still become. An organ scale of the eternal's acts, mounting to their climax in an endless calm, paces of the many-visaged wonderful, predestined stadia of the evolving way, measures of the stature of the growing soul, they interpreted existence to itself and, mediating twixt the heights and deeps, united the veiled married opposites and linked creation to the ineffable. A last high world was seen where all worlds meet, in its summit gleam where night is not nor sleep, the light began of the Trinity Supreme. All there discovered what it seeks for here. It freed the finite into boundlessness and rose into its own eternities. The inconscient found its heart of consciousness, the idea and feeling groping in ignorance at last clutched passionately the body of truth, the music born in matter's silences plucked nude out of the ineffable's fathomlessness the meaning it had held but could not voice, the perfect rhythm now only sometimes dreamed an answer brought to the torn earth's hungry need rending the night that had concealed giving to her her lost forgotten soul. A grand solution closed the long impasse in which the heights of mortal effort end. A reconciling wisdom looked on life, It took the striving undertones of mind and took the confused refrain of human hopes and made of them a sweet and happy call. It lifted from an underground of pain the inarticulate murmur of our lives and found for it a sense illimitable. A mighty oneness its perpetual theme, it caught the soul's faint scattered utterances, read hardly twixt our lines of rigid thought or mid this drowse and coma on matter's breast heard like disjointed mutterings in sleep. It grouped the golden links that they had lost and showed to them their divine unity, saving from the error of divided self the deep spiritual cry in all that is. All the great words that toiled to express the one were lifted into an absoluteness of light, an ever-burning revelation's fire and the immortality of the eternal voice. There was no quarrel more of truth with truth, the endless chapter of their differences retold in light by an omniscient scribe traveled through difference towards unity. Mind's winding search lost every tinge of doubt led to its end by an all-seeing speech that garbed the initial and original thought with the finality of an ultimate phrase, united with time's creative mood and tense to the style and syntax of identity. A paean swelled from the lost musing deeps, an anthem pealed to the triune ecstasies, a cry of the moments to the immortals bliss.as if the strophes of a cosmic ode, a hierarchy of climbing harmonies peopled with voices and with visages aspired in a crescendo of the gods from matter's abysses to the spirit's peaks. Above were the immortals' changeless seats, white chambers of dalliance with eternity and the stupendous gates of the alone. Across the unfolding of the seas of self appeared the deathless countries of the One. A many-miracled consciousness unrolled vast aim and process and unfettered norms, a larger nature's great familiar roads. Affranchised from the net of earthly sense calm continents of potency were glimpsed, homelands of beauty shut to human eyes, half seen at first through wonder's gleaming lids, surprised the vision with felicity, sun-belts of knowledge, moon-belts of delight stretched out in an ecstasy of widenesses beyond our indigent corporeal range. There he could enter, there a while abide. A voyager upon uncharted routes fronting the viewless danger of the unknown, adventuring across enormous realms, he broke into another space and time. Book 2. The Book of the Traveller of the Worlds. Canto 1. The World's Stare. Alone he moved watched by the infinity around him and the unknowable above. All could be seen that shuns the mortal eye, all could be known the mind has never grasped, all could be done no mortal will can dare. A limitless movement filled a limitless peace. In a profound existence beyond Earth's parent or kin to our ideas and dreams where space is a vast experiment of the soul, in an immaterial substance linked to ours in a deep oneness of all things that are, the universe of the unknown arose. A self-creation without end or pause revealed the grandeurs of the infinite, it flung into the hazards of its play a million moods, a myriad energies, the world, shapes that are fancies of its truth and the formulas of the freedom of its force. It poured into the ever-stable's flux a Bacchic rapture and revel of ideas, a passion and motion of everlastingness. There rose unborn into the unchanging surge thoughts that abide in their deathless consequence, words that immortal last though fallen mute, acts that brought out from silence its dumb sense, lines that convey the inexpressible. The eternal stillness saw in unmoved joy his universal power at work display in plots of pain and dramas of delight the wonder and beauty of her will to be. All, even pain, was the soul's pleasure here all experience was a single plan, the thousandfold expression of the One. All came at once into his single view, nothing escaped his vast intuitive sight, nothing drew near he could not feel as kin, he was one spirit with that immensity. Images in a supernal consciousness embodying the unborn who never dies, the structured visions of the cosmic self alive with the touch of being's eternity looked at him like form-bound spiritual thoughts figuring the movements of the ineffable. Aspects of being donned world outline, forms that open moving doors on things divine, became familiar to his hourly sight, the symbols of the spirit's reality, the living bodies of the bodiless grew near to him, his daily associates. The exhaustless seeings of the unsleeping mind, letterings of its contact with the invisible, surrounded him with countless pointing signs, the voices of 1,000 realms of life mission to him her mighty messages. The heaven hints that invade our earthly lives, The dire imaginations dreamed by hell, which if enacted and experienced here our dulled capacity soon would cease to feel or our mortal frailty could not long endure, were set in their sublime proportions there. There lived out in their self-born atmosphere, they resumed their topless pitch and native power, their fortifying stress upon the soul bit deep into the ground of consciousness the passion and purity of their extremes, the absoluteness of their single cry and the sovereign sweetness or violent poetry of their beautiful or terrible delight. All thought can know or widest sight perceive and all that thought and sight can never know, all things occult and rare, remote and strange were near to heart's contact, felt by spirit, sense. Asking for entry at his nature's gates they crowded the widened spaces of his mind, his self, discovery's flaming witnesses, offering their marvel and their multitude. These now became new portions of himself, the figures of his spirit's greater life, the moving scenery of his large time, walk or the embroidered tissue of his sense. These took the place of intimate human things and moved as close companions of his thoughts, or were his soul's natural environment. Tireless the heart's adventure of delight, endless the kingdoms of the spirit's bliss, unnumbered tones struck from one harmony's strings, each to its wide, winged universal poise, its fathomless feeling of the all-in-one, brought notes of some perfection yet unseen, its single retreat into truth's secrecies, its happy sidelight on the infinite. All was found there the unique has dreamed and made tinging with ceaseless rapture and surprise and an opulent beauty of passionate difference the recurring beat that moments God in time. Only was missing the soul timeless word that carries eternity in its lonely sound, the idea self, luminous key to all ideas, the integer of the spirit's perfect sum that equates the unequal all to the equal one, the single sign interpreting every sign, the absolute index to the absolute. They're walled apart by its own innerness in a mystical barrage of dynamic light. He saw a lone immense high, curved world, pile erect like a mountain, chariot of the gods motionless under an inscrutable sky. As if from matter's plinth and viewless base to a top as viewless, a carved sea of worlds climbing with foam, maned waves to the supreme ascended towards breadths immeasurable, it hoped to soar into the ineffable's reign, 100 levels raised it to the unknown. So it towered up to heights intangible and disappeared in the hushed conscious vast as climbs a storied temple, tower to heaven built by the aspiring soul of man to live near to his dream of the invisible. Infinity calls to it as it dreams and climbs, its spire touches the apex of the world, mounting into great voiceless stillnesses it marries the earth to screened eternities. Amid the many systems of the one made by an interpreting creative joy alone it points us to our journey back out of our long self, loss in nature's deeps, planted on earth it holds in it all realms, it is a brief compendium of the vast. This was the single stair to being's goal. A summary of the stages of the spirit, its copy of the cosmic hierarchies refashioned in our secret air of self, a subtle pattern of the universe. It is within, below, without, above. Acting upon this visible nature's scheme it wakens our earth, matter's heavy dose to think and feel and to react to joy, it models in us our diviner parts, lifts mortal mind into a greater air, makes yen this life of flesh to intangible aims, links the body's death with immortality's call, out of the swoon of the inconscience it labors towards a superconscient light. If earth were all and this were not in her, thought could not be nor life, delight's response, only material forms could then be her guests driven by an inanimate world, force. Earth by this golden superfluity bore thinking man and more than man shall bear, this higher scheme of being is our cause and holds the key to our ascending fate, it calls out of our dense mortality the conscious spirit nursed in matter's house. The living symbol of these conscious planes, its influences and godheads of the unseen, its unthought logic of realities acts arisen from the unspoken truth in things, have fixed our inner life's slow, scaled degrees. Its steps are paces of the soul's return from the deep adventure of material birth, a ladder of delivering ascent and rungs that nature climbs to deity. Once in the vigil of a deathless gaze these grades had marked a giant downward plunge, the wide and prone leap of a godhead's fall. Our life is a holocaust of the supreme. The great world, mother by her sacrifice has made her soul the body of our state, accepting sorrow and unconsciousness. Divinity's lapse from its own splendors wove the many, patterned ground of all we are. An idol of self is our mortality. Our earth is a fragment and a residue, and steeped in their color, lustres dimmed by her drowse, an atavism of higher births is hers, her sleep is stirred by their buried memories recalling the lost spheres from which they fell. Unsatisfied forces in her bosom move, they are partners of her greater growing fate and her return to immortality, they consent to share her doom of birth and death, they kindle partial gleams of the all and drive her blind laborious spirit to compose a meager image of the mighty whole. The calm and luminous intimacy within approves her work and guides the unseeing power. His vast design accepts a puny start. An attempt, a drawing half, done is the world's life, its lines doubt their concealed significance, its curves join not their high intended close. Yet some first image of greatness trembles there, and when the ambiguous crowded parts have met the many, toned unity to which they moved, the artist's joy shall laugh at reason's rules, the divine intention suddenly shall be seen, the end vindicate intuition's sure technique. A graph shall be of many meeting worlds, a cube and union, crystal of the gods, a mind shall think behind nature's mindless mask, a conscious vast fill the old dumb brute space. This faint and fluid sketch of soul called man shall stand out on the background of long time, a glowing epitome of eternity, a little point reveal the infinitudes. A mystery's process is the universe. At first was laid a strange anomalous base, a void, a cipher of some secret whole, where zero held infinity in its human eternal negative, a matrix naught, into its forms the child is ever born who lives forever in the vasts of God. A slow reversal's movement then took place, a gas belched out from some invisible fire, of its dense rings were formed these million stars, upon earth's new, born soil God's tread was heard. Across the thick smoke of earth's ignorance a mind began to see and look at forms and groped for knowledge in the nescient night, caught in a blind stone, grip force worked its plan and made in sleep this huge mechanical world, that matter might grow conscious of its soul and like a busy midwife the life, power deliver the zero carrier of the all. Because eternal eyes turned on earth's gulfs the lucent clarity of a pure regard and saw a shadow of the unknowable mirrored in the inconscient's boundless sleep, creation's search for self began its stir. A spirit dreamed in the crude cosmic whirl, mind flowed unknowing in the sap of life and matter's breasts suckled the divine idea. A miracle of the absolute was born, infinity put on a finite soul, all ocean lived within a wandering drop, a time-made body housed the illimitable. To live this mystery out our souls came here. A seer within who knows the ordered plan concealed behind our momentary steps, inspires our ascent to viewless heights as once the abysmal leap to earth and life. His call had reached the traveler in time. Apart in an unfathomed loneliness, he traveled in his mute and single strength bearing the burden of the world's desire. A formless stillness called, a nameless light. Above him was the white immobile ray, around him the eternal silences. No term was fixed to the high-pitched attempt, world after world disclosed its guarded powers, heaven after heaven its deep beatitudes, but still the invisible magnet drew his soul. A figure soul on nature's giant stair, he mounted towards an indiscernible end on the bare summit of created things. Canto 2. The Kingdom of Subtle Matter. In the impalpable field of secret self, this little outer being's vast support parted from vision by earth's solid fence, he came into a magic crystal air and found a life that lived not by the flesh, a light that made visible immaterial things. A fine degree in wonder's hierarchy, the kingdom of subtle matter's fairy craft outlined against a sky of vivid hues, leaping out of a splendor, trance and haze, the wizard revelation of its front. A world of lovelier forms lies near to ours, where, undisguised by earth's deforming sight, all shapes are beautiful and all things true. In that lucent ambience mystically clear the eyes were doors to a celestial sense, hearing was music and the touch a charm, and the heart drew a deeper breath of power. There dwell earth, nature's shining origins, the perfect plans on which she molds her works, the distant outcomes of her travailing force, repose in a framework of established fate. Attempted vainly now or won in vain, already were mapped and scheduled there the time and figure of her future sovereignties in the sumptuous lineaments traced by desire. The golden issue of mind's labyrinth plots, the richism found or still uncaught by our lives, unsullied by the attaint of mortal thought abide in that pellucid atmosphere. Our vague beginnings are overtaken there, our middle terms sketched out in prescient lines, our finished ends anticipated live. This brilliant roof of our descending plane, intercepting the free boon of heaven's air, admits small inrushes of a mighty breath or fragrant circuits through gold lattices. It shields our ceiling of terrestrial mind from deathless suns and the streaming of God's rain, yet canalizes a strange irised glow, and bright dews drip from the immortal sky. A passage for the powers that move our days, a cult behind this grosser nature's walls, a gossamer marriage, hall of mind with form is hidden by a tapestry of dreams, heaven's meaning steal through it as through a veil, its inner sight sustains this outer scene. A finer consciousness with happier lines, it has a tact our touch cannot attain, a purity of sense we never feel, its intercession with the eternal ray inspires our transient earth's brief, lived attempts at beauty and the perfect shape of things. In rooms of the young divinity of power and early play of the eternal child the embodiments of his outwinging thoughts laved in a bright everlasting wonder's tints and lulled by whispers of that lucid air take dream, hued rest like birds on timeless trees before they dive to float on earth, time sea. All that here seems has lovelier semblance there. Whatever our hearts conceive, our heads create, some high original beauty forfeiting, thence exiled here consents to an earthly tinge. Whatever is here figures are there undreamed by mortal mind, bodies that have no earthly counterpart traverse the inner eye's illumined trance and ravish the heart with their celestial tread persuading heaven to inhabit that wonder sphere. The future's marvels wander in its gulfs, things old and new are fashioned in those depths, a carnival of beauty crowds the heights in that magic kingdom of ideal sight. In its antechambers of splendid privacy matter and soul in conscious union meet like lovers in a lonely secret place, in the clasp of a passion not yet unfortunate they join their strength and sweetness and delight and mingling make the high and low worlds one. Intruder from the formless infinite daring to break into the inconscient's reign, the spirits leap towards body touches ground. As yet unwrapped in earthly lineaments, already it wears out lasting death and birth, convincing the abyss by heavenly form, a covering of its immortality alive to the luster of the wearer's rank, fit to endure the rub of change and time. A tissue mixed of the soul's radiant light and matter's substance of sign, burdened force, imagined vainly in our mind's thin air an abstract phantasm mold of mental make, it feels what earthly bodies cannot feel and is more real than this grosser frame. After the falling of mortality's cloak lightened is its weight to heighten its ascent, refined to the touch of finer environments it drops old patterned pools of denser stuff, cancels the grip oftil in the naked ether of the peaks the spirit simplicity alone is left, the eternal being's first transparent robe. But when it must come back to its mortal load and the hard ensemble of earth's experience, then its return resumes that heavier dress. For long before Earth's solid vest was forged by the technique of the atomic void, a lucent envelope of self, disguise was woven round the secret spirit in things. The subtle realms from those bright sheaths are made. This wonder, world with all its radiant boon of vision and inviolate happiness, only for expression cares and perfect form, fair on its peaks, it has dangerous nether plains, its light draws towards the verge of nature's lapse, it lends beauty to the terror of the gulfs and fascinating eyes to perilous gods, invests with grace the demon and the snake. Its trance imposes earth's inconscience, immortal it weaves for us death's somber robe and authorizes our mortality. This medium serves a greater consciousness, a vessel of its concealed autocracy, it is the subtle ground of matter's worlds, it is the immutable in their mutable forms, in the folds of its creative memory it guards the deathless type of perishing things, its lowered potencies found our fallen strengths, its thought invents our reasoned ignorance, its sense fathers our body's reflexes. Our secret breath of untried mightier force, the lurking sun of an instant's inner sight, Its fine suggestions are a covert fount for our iridescent rich imaginings till even earth's mud grows rich and warm with the skies and a glory gleams from the soul's decadence. Its knowledge is our error's starting point, its beauty dons our mud, mask ugliness, its artist good begins our evil's tale. A heaven of creative truths above, a cosmos of harmonious dreams between, a chaos of dissolving forms below, it plunges lost in our inconscient base. Out of its fall our denser matter came. Thus taken was God's plunge into the night. This fallen world became a nurse of souls inhabited by concealed divinity. A being woke and lived in the meaningless void, a world-wide nescience strove towards life and thought, a consciousness plucked out from mindless sleep. All here is driven by an insentient will. Thus fallen, inconscient, frustrate, dense, inert, sunk into inanimate and torpid drowse earth lay, a drudge of sleep, forced to create by a subconscient yearning memory left from a happiness dead before she was born, an alien wonder on her senseless breast. This Maya must harbor the orchid and the rose, from her blind unwilling substance must emerge a beauty that belongs to happier spheres. This is the destiny bequeathed to her, as if a slain god left a golden trust to a blind force and an imprisoned soul. An immortal godhead's perishable parts she must reconstitute from fragments lost, reword from a document complete elsewhere her doubtful title to her divine name. A residue her sole inheritance, all things she carries in her shapeless dust. Her giant energy tied to petty forms in the slow tentative motion of her power with only frail blunt instruments for use, she has accepted as her nature's need and given to man as his stupendous work a labor to the gods impossible. A life living hardly in a field of death its portion claims of immortality, a brute half-conscious body serves as means a mind that must recover a knowledge lost held in stone grip by the world's inconscience, and wearing still these countless knots of law a spirit bound stand up as nature's king. A mighty kinship is this daring's cause. All we attempt in this imperfect world, looks forward or looks back beyond time's gloss to its pure idea and firm inviolate type in an absolute creation's flawless skill. To seize the absolute in shapes that pass, to fix the eternal's touch in time, made things, this is the law of all perfection here. A fragment here is caught of heaven's design, else could we never hope for greater life and ecstasy and glory could not be. Even in the littleness of our mortal state, even in this prison, house of outer form, a brilliant passage for the infallible flame is driven through gross walls of nerve and brain, a splendor presses or a power breaks through, earth's great dull barrier is removed awhile, the inconscient seal is lifted from our eyes and we grow vessels of creative might.